people are funneling in after their for jumping off customer calls or pipeline reviews or sending out some follow-up notes, whatever us salespeople do for fun. And we'll jump into things in a second, but you're in the right place if you're here for Map U, the third workshop. The first one was kind of focused on just like, what is a mutual action plan and why would you use it with customers? Second one was getting into kind of more of the details of how to build a 10 out of 10 playbook and plan with your customer. Third one, this is going to get really tactical. We're going to talk about how to effectively set expectations with customers, how to multi-thread effectively, how to work with kind of your team internally on deals, focused on execution. And what else are we going to cover? Using maps to get valuable deal insights. So, kind of crafting this plan in partnership with your champion. Probably going to learn a lot more about how they're going to effectively sell internally and how to set them up for success. So we're going to talk about all those best practices today. And we have a couple experts who actually using this on a lot of their deals now and finding great success. So we have Michael here and Laura, both from Procurify. Kind of Laura's one of the top AEs on the team, and Michael is one of the sales managers, and excited to hear their thoughts firsthand on how they've been effectively using these to drive deals forward and build a more predictable, repeatable sales motion at Procurify. Cool. Well, maybe kick off with some quick intro. Also, this is kind of a different than a normal webinar style. As you can see, we're all in the same room here. I'm not doing my job if we're not getting folks jumping in with thoughts, comments. We're all here working on the exact same problems, how to more predictably close business, help customers effectively evaluate, validate, and onboard successfully. So really excited. This format has been way more fun than just us up here talking the whole time. So excited to get some thoughts from everyone else who's been figuring out ways to work with customers more effectively. So with that, I'll kick off with intros. I'll pass the mic off to Michael and Laura, and then we can dig in if that sounds good with everyone. So I'm Ross, CEO and co-founder of Accord. Started the company about 3 years ago after building out the sales team at Stripe for about 5 years, and really built the company because I found collaborating closely with customers was the best way to win more deals faster and build better partnerships with clients, and built Accord, basically this part map platform, or at least how that started. Now we help people build business cases, align with stakeholders, do a bunch of other stuff. But at the core of it is aligning with clients on helping customers buy. So with that, I'll pass it off to you, Michael, for a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ross. And again, congrats on the Series A. Well done. My name's Mike. I'm the sales manager at Procurify. I've been a sales leader for the last 14 years. I actually got my start in media and advertising, and had the chance to work for a small but global sales consulting company in the media space, which gave me the chance to coach and lead sales teams across not only Canada and cities in the US, but spent a little bit of time in Australia and the UK as well. From there, I joined Ceridian, and then shortly thereafter, I found myself working with the great folks at Procurify. And this is where we get a chance to help companies really save time and money by improving their spend and purchasing approval processes. And one of the reasons why I enjoy what I do at Procurify, it gives me a chance to work with a really great sales team. One of them is with us today. I'm going to turn it over to one of my favorite people, Laura.
Thanks, Mike. So my name is Laura. I've been in tech sales for the past 7, almost 8 years. Initially, and I started off in the digital marketing software space, and then transitioned into the fintech space, and spent most of the time here at Procurify, which has been a great experience so far. But sometimes sales process can become a bit challenging, selling to people that are not really used to buying software. And guiding people through that process has been a great learning experience, and just trying to understand and apply different strategies on how to make sure deals are moving forward has been great. Mike, working together here, and I'm looking forward to sharing what I've learned so far from mutual action plans and in Accord.
Awesome. Well, excited to, hear both of your learnings today and everyone else's, maybe to make this a bit more collaborative. Can't ask everyone to do an intro, but in the chat, if you change, the default is probably, I think, to just the host. If you change it to everyone and put in where you're calling in from and a bit about your role, maybe where you're working today. I'm calling in from frigid Toronto, Ontario, where we've had the most mild winter of my experience, and then it's been like -20 Celsius. So trying to stay warm here. And Bob, yes, very jealous that you're in Spain right now. Cool. So let's kick things off. I'm not a huge fan of decks, but we'll kind of use it to guide the conversation. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about, how to effectively use mutual action plans to multi-thread, get deal insights from your champion. And I think a key insight to this is like how to operationalize it, working with either with your manager or with your AEs on this kind of motion. Michael and Laura just introduced themselves as well as myself. And again, we're going to talk about, tips to multi-thread and align with buyers. Really, as Laura said, like really helping buyers buy is the number one lever you have to move deals forward. So we're going to talk about how to use this as a tool to do that. And the other two, if you're interested, we'll share links, kind of the basics of maps, as well as building really solid executive summaries and solid templates for them as well. But let's kick off the meat of things. Michael, maybe to kick things off, why is partnering, aligning with your buyer on deals critical, and how do you do this effectively with a map?
So I think a couple things to keep in mind, and we try to be conscious of this all the time. It's important to recognize that people spend about 99.9% of their time not buying software from us. I think it's something that Laura mentioned at the outset. And so often we encounter people trying to navigate that buying process or the buyer's journey, if you will, based on what they think they should be doing. And there's with that a lot of guesswork involved when you're trying to purchase a service that you've never purchased before. We often find that a prospect's way of thinking seldom matches the sales rep's idea of how things should go. And so when there's misalignment, deals can stall. Other priorities creep in. What Accord allows us to do is helps us to build a plan together with our champions and the folks that we're speaking to, and also engage with key decision makers to help keep things on track. I think really the obligation falls to us to help guide the buyer throughout that process so they can make a sound decision based on having all the necessary information and resources that they need.
For sure. I think the thing that always comes up to me is being proactive and making that recommendation. I think what I constantly see from the top sellers, the top 10% of sellers on any team, the folks that are consistently above quota, is they are making strong recommendations to customers. They're not just like, hey, this is my thing. What are you solving for? And what do you want to do? It's like, hey, this is who we help. Based on just seeing your webpage and title, I probably have some pretty good insights into how you can use this. Let's talk about that briefly, and then I'm going to make a really strong recommendation of maybe 2 paths we can go down. So I think maps really helps spell that out, because like you said, this was a big aha moment to me early in my sales career. I took for granted how much time customers actually think about my thing, right? Like we're in our company, all we think about is this thing, how we're going to help these customers. Sadly, they're on Slack during these meetings. They're, texting their husbands or wives. They have a lot of other stuff. They have a day job on top of potentially evaluating your thing, and you get paid for it. So there's this really, I think, misaligned expectation between, how much effort you need to put in to help them effectively evaluate and validate and purchase. So maps are a great way of like spelling that out to make their job very easy, so they don't need to listen to every word and they can consume it on their own time, and help share that with other champions. Maybe to take a pause before we ask Laura some advice here. I want to make sure this is interactive. If someone wants to jump in, and I'd love to hear their experience. I know not everyone calls it a map. People do this, they hack it together in Google Docs, Sheets, Asana, Notion, maybe just an email summary of the deal. Would love, if someone wants to kind of share their experience, kind of learning about how to effectively guide customers and be really prescriptive in the sales process. And I'm past silence being awkward because I've done sales for too long. So someone feel free to jump in or.
To me, I think one of the really important distinctions is, some sales organizations talk in terms of a close plan, and that tends to be very internally focused. There are certain customer actions that might find a place there, but it's really all about how do I close the deal. And I think the idea of mutual action plans, or whatever you choose to call them, some of my clients have sort of talked about mutual success plans or what have you, is it encourages you to put yourself in the customer's shoes and not simply think about what you need to do as a salesperson. I think you talked about sort of facilitating a buying decision. And, if that buying process is trying to buy something that's unfamiliar to them, haven't done it before, they're probably going to need some help, some guidance, some shared experience from, other customers who've been on that journey and come out the other side successfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I think it's really about that reframing. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I think, the tools that sellers have that kind of frames everything in the sales process, and even the words that are used to describe the stages in Salesforce or HubSpot. We're doing discovery, we're qualifying, we are negotiating, we are closing. Those are words that your customer would never think of in terms of their experience. And I think this really helps translate from the ops world and the required, information that a sales organization revenue team needs to how to empower sellers to think about this way. And I see this again as like the biggest blocker to that, top 10% or 20%. And the rest is people get stuck in sales mode. And if you have something like this, it kind of puts you in the frame of mind of like, what are the objective milestones you need to work through to help someone effectively evaluate and validate and onboard. So that's one thing that I've thought of. But Laura, I'm curious to hear, in your 8 years of selling, it sounds like maybe this is a more recent tool that you've been using. Kind of how has this helped you partner more closely with customers and build a more kind of consistent path to success for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Accord has been really helpful, but I've kind of used my own custom maps, and I was just using like a Google Sheet in the past, or a slide, to make sure that I was always setting up a next step at the end of every meeting. And sometimes when you bring up timelines or asking customer, when would you like to have something in place? What are the goals? And if they don't have a clear timeline, they may think like, well, I'm not sure yet, or I'm not ready to buy. And the way that I decided to really frame it, and I like what you, Bob, shared, like make it a mutual success plan. So I frame it in a way that I understand there are things that need to happen before you can make a decision. And I'm just here really to collaborate with you. So really kind of put myself in a position where they feel we're on the same team. I'm just helping you go through these steps so that you can make an informed decision. So I know before you can sign off, probably we need to speak with someone else on your side, or you need to go through a technical evaluation or legal evaluation. So when I just bring up those options, they say, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Then maybe we should, set this up as a next step, and actually having something visual for them to see, I think makes that conversation easier for them to actually suggest steps and set up those actual dates, and then work towards that timeline. So I've found that just framing it in a way that we're just actually, this is a mutual, as the name says, this is something that we're going to be collaborating, we're going to be building together. It doesn't have to be set in stone, right? This is just to kind of put a frame that we can work towards, and if things change, then we can adjust it. But it's been very helpful to just introduce it as something that we're going to be working on together. I'm just not asking you for a timeline because I want to know when are you going to sign, right? Yeah. So it's a way for us to help the customer, and at the end of the day, help our goal as well, to understand when this customer could potentially come in, right? Yeah. And help us plan from there.
Totally. Well said. Yeah, it kind of reframes the whole mindset, helps them be part of that collaboration. And I mean, people are so visual. Again, like if you know the process, you can say it, it's like, it all makes sense to me. It's gibberish to them, and people want to see something and be able to read it themselves, and like they're listening to what you're saying, but it's, kind of validated. So totally agree. Maybe before move on, the next section is going to be, this is probably the most common question that I get related to mutual plans, is how do you introduce a map to a prospect? When do you do it? And how do you frame it successfully? So we can talk for days about like how it's the right thing to do, and it's mutual and building this thing together. But like very specifically, I've seen a huge difference in how a sales rep can get the customer to make this their procurement plan and really drive this together, versus they feel like what Bob said, which is a closed plan. And I think it's in this talk track and the framing of it very specifically, and when you do it in the process. So maybe this would be a good opportunity to turn it to some other folks who kind of sold in this way, whether you've called it a mutual closed plan or success plan or whatever, or just been using Sheets or PowerPoint. Maybe I'll pause again and see if anyone wants to jump in with some thoughts of how they've successfully done this in the past, or they're experimenting with. Brad, I hope you don't mind if I call you out here, but I know you sell in this way. So I'm gonna call you out for a second, if you don't mind kind of sharing your experience, kind of your development path, both on partnerships and sales. Like, how do you frame this? When do you think is the right time in a deal? And then what does that talk track sound like?
Yeah, I frame it early on. And the reason I do that is because partnerships is slightly different than being like an AE or something like that, where there's just so much ambiguity and a lot of people involved and things like that. So my goal is to really get as many people involved as possible, so that the partnership doesn't fall onto one single internal champion. And the way to do that is by proposing this partnership plan, which is the mutual action plan, and going from there. And then so you have your internal champion on the other side, and then where they're going is they're going, oh, okay, well, if we want to launch this, then I'll get my marketing person involved, and we're going to need our technical people involved here. And it kind of just creates that like home base that then allows the rest of the process to be really prescriptive versus reactive, which is kind of how I approach it.
Got it. And what is that? Yeah, how, maybe if you don't mind, like 30-second snippet. Let's say it's that, first or second call, there's a clear potential alignment on this partnership or deal. You're talking to that potential champion who showed interest. You need all these other folks involved. You bring up your sheet or doc or a cord or whatever it is. What does that sound like to frame it to them?
What I love about it most is like, you have a process, and so it makes it sound like you've been there before, even if you're completely bullshitting. Like, having this tool like helps you, like, yeah, I do this all the time, like I know exactly what I'm doing. So for my case, it's listen, I have a process here, and the way that we do this is typically we'll map out what the next 30, 60, 90 days look like, who the stakeholders need to be involved. And I do this with a whole base that allows us to have it be collaborative. And so I'm going to send you over this link. It'll get us into this plan, and we'll work out of this for the rest of the process going forward to make sure that we're on the same page throughout. It's very disarming. They actually love it, typically, because it's not just like emails going back and forth, like, which is typically what deals seem to be. And so, yeah, I've found really zero pushback and a lot of compliments on that.
Yeah, I think that's a big surprise from a lot of folks that don't do this, is like, we have so many gong and chorus recordings of literally the conversation stopping and being like, wait, like, you're actually sharing with me like what the whole journey is going to look like from day one, and like who needs to be involved in all this stuff. Like, in sales, unfortunately, it can very much feel like, because there's the pressure to hit goals, especially now, it can very much feel like you're being sold. Like, every next step, every new stakeholder. Like, I need to get to the CFO because I'm worried about them blocking it early. I need to get to this decision maker. Like, it feels very much, medic-y and like your process and methodology, and not like you're actually trying to help them. So when you're like, hey, let me put the cards on the table. This is how, like you said, everyone, like you act, even if you're a startup, like this is how everyone effectively evaluates and onboards successfully. Whether or not you become a customer, I'm going to share with you what the process looks like and how this typically goes. Let me know if this doesn't make sense, or maybe you're super early and like none of this is helpful. But just kind of putting it out there, I find really disarms the potential partner or customer, and really puts you beside the table, to use kind of that analogy. Like, you go from sitting across from them and negotiating to like, hey, we're going to build this thing together. And you're really dropping, kind of that facade of you're hard closing them on something.
Yeah, and you can information gather too, because you can disqualify with these as well.
Yes.
If they're not willing to go through that process, then like you've unlocked that they are not ready to buy, and potentially saved yourself 6 months of chasing a contract. So
I know some sales leaders who don't even make their reps do this in the deal, but make them do it up front just to DQ deals. Like, they're like, I don't care if you use this past the second or third call, but if you are not asking them the question and pulling up a potential timeline or a process and asking them, would you go through this in the next, 3 to 6 months? And they're, oh, I'm in information gathering mode. Oh, I'm in this thing. Exactly. That can be the power of it in and of itself, outside of obviously actually working through it and driving that mutual accountability. I know also Camber used this a bit differently on some of the post-sales side of things, and really complex integrations and onboarding and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious to hear if there's a difference on your end with how you think about using mutual plans, not just in the early stage of deals, but also for actually developing that partnership and getting to value.
Yeah. And I mean, I think similar to Brad, ours is a partnership sale. So I think when he said there's a lot of ambiguity, that really spoke to me. So I think it's really key for us using that on the front end to really just generate like more connectivity, I guess, throughout the organization. So I think what we found is these partnership sales right now in this environment, you have to be connected to different organizations. I think I've had 2 or 3 deals where my contact gets laid off. So it's like a reality of increasing kind of that depth and penetration to the organization. Then also for our partnerships, which are so heavy success-based after the sale, actually promoting the partnership. We run capital partnerships for platforms. It's that kind of like continuous thread flowing into customer success, where now customer success can take over that accord. And I think your customer success manager said, we don't want the end milestone to be the signature date. It's almost like because they think the work is done. We have that next step be, implementation kickoff, and then really flow in, so that it's not like the partnership is over once the signature happens. It's continuous after.
Totally. And it's funny because I think one of the biggest challenge sales and revenue teams have, and this was, kind of surprising to me, was not so much even closing deals, but getting them live. And you're like, that's crazy. The person signed and even paid. But right now, like, prioritization is shifting a lot. People are coming and going. It's really actually hard to continue that momentum through a deal, even once it's signed or on that finish line. And you can't solve that problem. And a lot of us get paid. Like at Stripe, I only got paid on live processing deals. If you're at a lot of companies, there are clawbacks, or you don't even get paid out until customer has gotten to success. And I find that you can't solve that problem post sales. It needs to be literally on that probably second or third call. This is what it's going to look like for us to work together. And these are the resources that we're going to support you with and that you're going to need to get there. And unless you have that timeline to start there, you're never going to be successful trying to do that after the sale, because you haven't set the right expectations. And that's a great point in terms of the people that you need to have involved, what's going to happen post sales, all those pieces. And you can even, I find, actually drive a lot of energy in the deal from those people. and that level of rigor that you're showing them, it's like, oh shit, this person is going to take care of me. They're actually talking about this stuff, and people think it's going to overcomplicate the deal. That's what I constantly hear from more junior sales reps and managers, is like, no, we got to focus on the close. But yeah, unless you're focused on post sales, you're never gonna consistently get your customers to success. Well, shifting gears, because I know we're flying through time here. The next section I'd love to get Michael and Laura's thoughts on for a second is, we kind of talked about a little bit, getting insights from your champions and from stakeholders on deals, from taking this kind of more collaborative approach, and getting a deeper understanding of the deal. So yeah, maybe Michael, to pass the mic off to you. How do these mutual plans and selling in this more collaborative way help you understand the details of how deals are actually going in terms of stakeholders, decision makers, real momentum, objective momentum on the deal versus it feeling good?
Yeah, for sure. So Accord is just one of the few tools that we use to help us forecast deals a little bit more accurately. And there's a few things that I look forward to that will determine my confidence level in a deal and how it's progressing. One of the things that I look for is intent. So if we invite someone to an Accord, if we introduce it, and assuming that we do it the right way, is someone serious enough that they're willing to and accept this mutual action plan? That's always a good first sign. I also look for things like the number of invitations to Accord that get accepted by multiple stakeholders. There's a direct correlation between sales success and number of stakeholders and key decision makers that are engaged in the process. So higher engagement level, higher my confidence level that a deal will get done. And I also look to see if the overall health of our progression is high, meaning, are we on track with steps? Is anything overdue? Where are we stalled? And what this allows us to do is really get into the weeds with these sorts of things, where if we're at a stage where maybe something's getting delayed, that triggers a discussion around resources. How can we help the prospect overcome a barrier, a delay? What can we do internally? And all of these are parts of the discussions that we're having with the AEs to put them in a position where they can help move deals along.
Yeah, it makes it much more objective in terms of like, where are we actually? Yes, it sounded like a great call, but they haven't accepted the invite. So like, if they're not even going to look at what the process is to buy, why do you think they are going to buy this month or this quarter? And oh, maybe they didn't sound that hot on it, but they sent it to 4 colleagues internally, including a director or a C-level. Well, yeah, maybe it didn't feel that good, but like, they're putting their social capital out there to share this with senior stakeholders internally. Probably worth following up or trying to get in touch with those folks and build that business case, right? So that's what I've always found. And even as a seller, I think I have a pretty good intuition, but it really helps ground me in like, what is real and what's not. And yeah, Laura, curious to hear on your end how you've used this as a tool to kind of drive deal insights and help you be more confident or less so in certain deals in the pipeline.
Yeah, definitely having those insights of what's happening offline or out, after the calls has helped me understand who is actually engaged and what deals are moving forward quickly. But at the same time, who's actually keeping, themselves accountable to the steps or the activities that they mentioned they were gonna do. So even if they're not being really engaged, accepting the invite or looking at the Accord, once we reconnect on a meeting, I always start off and bring up the mutual action plan again and recap. Okay, well, we've already completed all of these steps. We agreed that by this date we were gonna have this thing done. How's that progressing? So sometimes and it will happen that people are not really accepting the invite. Maybe that's not something they want to spend the time on, but they are having the conversation. So just making sure that I'm always recapping, kind of bringing them back to that mutual action plan and seeing if they're actually working towards it. Then, that can also give me reassurance of how the deal is progressing. Sometimes you kind of have to walk them step by step and not just expect that they're going to follow things on their end. So just making sure that you're always going back to it and keeping them accountable has been helpful. because the insights are great, but sometimes there may be other things happening offline that you're not aware of. So just making sure I check in on the next meeting. Maybe new things have come up, right? Something that they have not taken the time to enter on the timeline, but then they can share, okay, well, actually, I don't know, this person left the company, so now we have to backfill the position, and that's going to delay things, or we have issues with this other implementation, and now the budget has been affected. So all those kinds of things that might not be able to, or willing to just proactively enter them into the timeline or mutual action plan, but just getting them to reference back to the plan that we had, and just suggest those updates, or go through those questions, has been helpful. And then just making sure that we're bringing in the key stakeholders, right? Had a conversation earlier with the company in the healthcare space and realized, well, even though I'm connecting directly with the CEO, there's a lot of other people that are involved in this process, and that they have to get the approval before moving forward. So actually walking them through the mutual action plan kind of cleared my mind on what needed to get done before getting the deal signed. Because, you know, from my perspective, I thought, okay, I'm
Yeah, the
dealing directly with
CEO,
the
you're done.
CEO.
Yeah.
The CEO is the one signing, then this is good to go, but not really, right? So just making sure you're asking the questions and just not assuming who will be part of the decision. It's, you know, been very helpful.
Totally. Yeah. I think you hit on a really important part. And I think there's this misnomer where it's like, oh, like, yes, it's a signal if they're engaging and they're using a Google Sheet or a piece of technology like a Cord. But I've actually found that some of the best sellers don't rely on their customer to do the things. But like you said, they bring it up at, if you have that weekly meeting or whatever that sync is, bring it up and say, hey, this is what we said we'd do. I did these things and this is where we progressed. Were you able to do this? And if they did, awesome, you're building the sense of momentum in the deal and kind of proof through doing the work that it's going to get done. And sometimes on longer deal cycles, it can feel hard to build that momentum and keep that energy up. And if you're crossing things off and you're moving forward and able to show them all the work you did, that's really positive. And if not, I think a lot of people struggle to, because you want to get a deal done. You want these people to like you. It's kind of hard and awkward to like give them a hard time about it, like hold them accountable to a thing that they said they would do. And you want to be like, oh, it's fine, like next week, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it helps you be like, well, we said we'd do this, to go back to what you were trying to accomplish. And it's not about the timeline. It's about, you said you wanted to accomplish this thing. In order to do that, hey, don't give them the out and just say, hey, next week, let's get this done today. How can we do this now? Can I take something off your plate to get this done end of day? Because we were targeting doing this thing next. And I think a framework like this and having something written down really supports that conversation and kind of gives you an out to, it's like, hey, we said we'd do this thing. It's not just this renegotiation. You're going back to what you kind of already agreed on. So I found that a really helpful resource for doing that. But before we move on, go for it.
Chime in. Sorry, Ross, just to chime in. I'm Ryan, based in the Bay Area. I work for Zendesk on the enterprise sales team. Congrats on your success, kind of like a longtime lurker and admirer. And it's great to be here. But to tie back in what Brad and as well as you, Ross, it feels like people just have a lot going on these days, or maybe they always have been, but promoting transparency, promoting accountability, all we're looking to do is mitigate risk. And this feels like a really collaborative approach to like increasingly complex deals. You know, you're dealing with legal, you're dealing with security, you're dealing with different stakeholders, your champion. But if this is something that everyone can work in, it seems powerful. But I'm just learning about it.
Yeah, how do you do this today outside of, forget a Cord? Like, how do you kind of facilitate these kind of conversations? Let's say kind of that Laura's example, you get on a call, it's your champion, maybe you put together this awesome business case and they were supposed to, this just happened to us, they were supposed to have a meeting a week ago with their CEO and this board member, and it's like, oh, didn't really get around to it, this thing, blah, blah, blah. Like,
sure.
How do you facilitate that? Yeah.
I think Brad called it out. It's a lot of multi-threading that's email based. You know, I'm emailing people, I'm calling my champion before a call with a broader audience. So it feels like a chord can strengthen that alignment. Your point about misalignment really resonated because sometimes it's like herding cats.
Totally. Yeah. That's a good best practice. Like, yeah, before that meeting, it's like, hey, prep them, and like, oh, we didn't get the schedule the time. It's like, okay, then when can we do this? And if you're just relying on them, and you don't have a clear kind of timeline and steps mapped out, then it's easy for maybe it to feel like it wasn't supposed to happen, right? If you didn't have that drawn out and had the specific date to it. And so yeah, that was, at least helpful for us on that deal. We're able to say like, hey, like this was the next incremental step and you want to do this thing. How do we make sure we can stick to that timeline and that game plan? Because verbally, then you don't want to like get this blame game. It's like, well, you said you did this, so it didn't really matter. They didn't have time. So I emailed it to them, and you're like, well, good luck getting a $50,000 deal approved over an email. And yeah, totally. Well, to wrap things up, I think something that I've just started to learn a lot about through my journey at Accord is kind of this AE manager level collaboration. I was most of my sales career, I've been at early stage startups where I had awesome managers, but really it was more about unblocking internal things than actually like proactive deal coaching, where I think a lot of the best teams really have more rigor around. So I'm curious, Michael or others, kind of how you've used something that's more objective, that's mapped out versus just a conversation or a follow-up email to drive that AE manager partnership and really support that relationship.
Yeah. So like Accord helps us solve a problem. I think our first step was to be very clear with the AEs and be very collaborative with the sales team to identify the exact problem that we're trying to solve. So we spent a lot of time with the AEs in our one-on-one meetings and in conversations to identify some of the key reasons why deals are stalling, maybe they're coming off the track. And when we spoke with our team, the feedback that we received were things like, maybe a lack of urgency or competing priorities start creeping in when you're talking to somebody. I got ghosted. They won't call me back. They won't email me back. Like we heard quite a bit. When we offered them the chance to learn about a tool like Accord, and we shared, hey, we've got this tool that's going to go a long way in helping you solve some of those issues. The team was, of course, very, very receptive. And I am lucky to work with a team that is open to new ideas. I think for the most part, everybody embraced it right away. I think some people wanted a better understanding how they position it. Again, shout out to your group. Both Dave and Tarek do a really great job of explaining the why behind how this tool can solve it. But just the reception from the team was overwhelmingly positive because this helps directly address those problems and issues that they identified that were getting in the way of helping them have more success with some of these deals.
Yeah, you nailed it, which is this can be framed from leadership as either another thing to do on deals, like, hey, on top of all the stuff we asked you to do and fill out Salesforce forms and provide feedback to product and coach other reps, and here's another thing you need to fill out because I don't trust that you're doing the right things on deals. Like that is so far from what this should be like. And I think without really digging into what are the challenges that they're actually seeing that is impacting their ability to make more money, aka lose winnable deals and maybe not hit quota or exceed as much as they can. That's the why behind an initiative like using mutual plans with customers. There's also the aspirational side of things, which is like, everyone wants to grow in their career. And this is another tool that you can add to your toolkit of things that are going to develop you. If you want to become an incredible enterprise seller, if you want to become a top sales leader or manager, these are things that you just need to learn how to do. And I think positioning it as advancing your career, partnering better with customers, honestly, it's way more fun when you do have that level of partnership and driving deals forward where you feel like you're in the driver's seat versus, kind of playing this weird, going back to what Brad and Ryan said, like this ambiguous, like unclear of like what's happening next and everything in these complex enterprise deals. It's fun when you know what's going on and it helps you ask these difficult questions to be super aligned with your clients. So as in most things, getting to the why behind it is the kind of secret, I think, to that partnership between AEs and managers. Cool. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. Any from folks out there, any thoughts or questions or things that popped up in your mind that would be helpful to either share or ask Michael or Laura or myself? Cool. Well, if so, feel free to. Oh, Camber, you want to jump in with something?
Yeah, I think more on the piece of, and I think maps help with this, but really it's like the relationship with your champion. And I think I used to always be like, people would talk about, oh yeah, I was just texting, my contact the other day. And I was like, how are you getting on a texting basis? So I think just overall curious how just your take on maps and kind of really driving that relationship with your contact to get to that next level. And maybe it's like kind of more around trust, but would just love to hear any thoughts on that.
I think they're super, super aligned. And the way that I think about using a map isn't, hey, I'm using this thing with you. It becomes this third-party objective thing that we can work on together to get them to success. And that is, I think, a really big mindset shift from what the best folks do. And it feels like you're working on this partnership together versus you're trying to close them. It can still feel like you're trying to close them, even if you're using a map. If it's not, hey, I'm doing this extra work for you to be able to bring this to this other team, and creating that separation between them and their team. And that's where I get to that texting basis or Slack basis, is like, hey, before we get on this team call, like, do you have 5 minutes? And you share your number, or hey, do you have 5 minutes before? Mine's just jumping on, or after, hey, can we debrief after this call? Here's my number. Putting in the Zoom chat one-on-one when you're on the call, or just send them an email during it. That's where you it becomes you and them, and you're working on this project together, kind of not against, but like you're separating their company and project from it. Seeing some nods that, yeah, Brad or someone else, or Ryan, feel free to jump in with kind of how you've gotten to that level of partnership.
Yeah. Everyone's texting nonstop all the time. And so if you've established trust with that person, and to Ross's point, it's like you're helping each other. Oftentimes, like I was working with a healthcare prospect, and just sent him a text and he was really responsive. So I'm not going to text someone if I don't really know them, or it's just out of the blue. But, after you've had like some positive momentum and, there's that trust, then either ask, or in some cases you can just shoot them a text and be like, hey, it's Ryan. How's it going? Have you done X, Y, and Z? And yeah, that's worked for me.
Yeah, make it about a give-get for that first thing. It's like, do something for them, put together a great proposal, and ask for their feedback. And that's actually been a huge unlock for me to getting that initial trust and like feeling like we're on the same team. Is like, if you're doing something for them, don't just send it over, ask them for their feedback. If it's going to other stakeholders, hey, I spent some time on this. I'm not, hey, can you send it to them because I'm trying to get to other stakeholders and I'm doing this like sales tactic. It's like, hey, I spent some time doing this. I value your feedback, and I'm not going to go over you or use you as a conduit to these champions. Give me the thing back, and then let's take it to the team. So hopefully that's a helpful kind of tactic there to get on that texting basis. Because yeah, it's super powerful, and you're going to totally change the dynamic in the deal.
Thank you.
That's a good one. Awesome. Well, we're at time. This flew by. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in and making this more of a collaborative session. Huge thanks to Michael and Laura for sharing their experience, both, kind of hacking this together with Google Docs and Sheets, and what, I've done in my career to transitioning to a Cord. I think really the big differentiator there is it feels a lot more professional, but also it helps drive the consistency and rigor. Like I always use mutual plans, but like late in my deal, and like there wouldn't be a thing that like really sparked the thing to do it. And I would really only use it on deals that I thought were for sure going to close, because it took a lot of time. With something like a Cord, boom, that first or second conversation, let's align to these things. It makes it really easy and lightweight to do. So if you're interested, feel free to use it. Anyone that signed up for MapU, I know a lot of folks here are already customers, but if you aren't, you can use the free workspace as part of our new solo package. And if it seems like might be helpful to your company, definitely feel free to reach out. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of the day and week.